episode. In this episode, we will be taking the cylinder head that you saw us take off on the last episode. We're going to recondition this head. Before we do anything, there'll be a few steps we need to do. We've got to clean this face. We've got to check it for flatness. Probably going to take these off and clean them and perhaps recondition those. These areas in here of the exhaust, this is the exhaust side of the engine. We'll clean these out as well. This is an oil return gallery. We'll make sure these stay clean. So there's a lot to do and a lot to get through. So stay tuned and we'll start doing it. So here we have the cylinder head set up. It's on a cylinder head stand. These are the cylinder head stands. I got these off eBay. So there's the brand there. They came in a package just like that. Sealy is the brand. You put them together, they bolt on the bottom, they go in one of the holes on the top of the head and they hold the head up like you see here. I'll put a link in the description below. So here we have the cylinder head. In the previous video you saw it removed. So when working on a oily cylinder head like this, it's a good idea to put on proper protective gear, gloves. So in the cylinder head, these are each of the valves. For these, we will need a valve compressor tool, and inside is a retaining clip. This is the intake side of the cylinder head. The exhaust side is over here. So this is cylinder number 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, when you're doing this, it's a really good idea not to change the order of the valves. So this valve here, which is number 1 intake, number 2 intake on cylinder number 1 should remain in those positions. It's just a good idea. It's a good practice whenever you're working on an engine not to change things around because they've seated and broken in. First thing we're going to do with the cylinder head is we're going to flip it over. So here we have the cylinder head face. There's a little bit of gasket material left on here which we will be cleaning off. These studs should come out. They just pop out. Working on this, we're going to need a few things. We'll be using some of this brake cleaner to clean the carbon off. Brake cleaner works really well for that. Probably a good idea to have some of this floating around, WD-40. Marker is a handy thing. You're going to need to number things. While we're here, you'll notice on the cylinder face, looks like there's a little bit of tiny bit of very thin adhesive in here. So we'll give that a scrape. The aluminum is a soft metal. So when you're scraping the cylinder face, you don't want to use a steel blade. Generally what I use is one of these. And now you've got a plastic surface to scrape this. This won't damage the aluminum, it's softer, but it will scrape. You want to have a rag handy to wipe things down. So we'll do a little bit of scraping now. Can't really measure the cylinder head for flatness until it's been scraped off. We're going to flip it back over. As the head is easy to flip over, back and forth. These factory cylinder head bolts, they take a 8mm socket. So I'm using a 1/4 inch drive 8mm socket. And we'll take these off. I already loosened these off a little bit. Wanted to make sure they would come off. Pretty straightforward. Now the idea of all of this is we want to keep things as clean as possible. We will be cleaning the head eventually. Getting any dust and dirt out of it and debris, making sure it's nice and clean. Looks like there's a little bit of a fine glue applied to them. Take that cloth out of there. And looks like there's an O-ring which is seated right here. This we will be replacing with a new one. So the O-ring is compressed. It sits in that spot like that, and that's the O-ring. Looks like this was glued from the factory with a little bit of glue. probably to keep it tight and keep it sealed. So we'll get a bag, we'll write this down. So remember, this is the intake side, this is the exhaust side, this is cylinder number 4. So we'll write down C4 on here, intake, put everything in there for safekeeping. Now, as I mentioned in the last video, this is cylinder 1, by the way. Hopefully this head is flat. If it's flat and does not need to be planed, that would be an advantageous thing, because we can just lap the valves, clean it up, and put it back on the bike. So now we need to clean this off, and that's the next step. Okay folks, a little bit about breathing apparatus. As you can see here, I have some breathing apparatus. When you're working on aluminum, we're going to be using a Dremel to clean some of this off. A little mechanical cleaning, a little scraping, and it gives off aluminum dust. Aluminum dust is not good for you. You want to have a proper breathing apparatus that can filter out particles. So I have this mask. Routinely change the filters in it. N95 mask will do just as well. So we'll put this on. The nice thing about these stands is they stabilize the head in different directions and planes. So first we'll start with scraping the intakes. After we've scraped them, we'll use the Dremel. So here's the scraper. Let's have a look, see how we do here. And this scrape is doing a good job. It's getting the larger pieces off. May need to put a new blade on it here in a second. Again, you want to remove as much as you can. So you can see here. So here you can see I'm scraping. And the scraper, it's clearly taking some material off. Yep, there goes the blade. It's probably time for a new one. So, again, the scraper is the way to go, and so I'll get this done. Okay, folks, so I've cleaned as much as I can off with the scraper, so now we're going to use the Dremel. I got a brass brush on here, let's put that where you can see it. And we're just going to gently, at a low RPM, clean this off, okay? Upper eye protection is a good idea. And there we go. Put a Dremel. Okay, so I've cleaned the intakes, and now I'm going to clean these exhaust ports. These have a lot more carbon in them, as you can see, and in here there is a metal gasket that goes in to seal this. So with this I'll be using a Dremel like this with a flat brass head on it. So we'll get the protection on, and away we go. So I've now cleaned half of it, and we'll give these a squirt. Good idea to hose the carbon down on the inside. Start cleaning these out.